So this is Michael Hall from Ubuntu Touch. And again, we're really excited to have Ubuntu here, really coming strong. And even though John has to leave tomorrow, Michael's going to be here today. I think he's going to be here tomorrow as well.
Yes,
so,
tomorrow.
So we will continue any conversation we have with this, but let's take it away.
All right. So this is going to be more of a developer workshop. So if anybody has any questions at any time, you can just ask them during the middle of it. You don't have to wait till the end. There's not going to be a dedicated Q&A. If anyone wants to move up and get closer to do that, that would be fine too. You don't have to sit all the way in the back. As I said, my name is Michael Hall. I work for Canonical on the community team. I work for Mr. John O'Bacon here, who you saw earlier. I am a recovering codeaholic. I spent 10 years as a developer doing everything from Perl to Java, Python, PHP, until I moved to Jono's team and I started doing community work. And so I kind of got out of the coding game for a little while. Until recently. It's been 18 hours since my last code commit now. When we announced the Ubuntu SDK back in January, I really jumped on that as an opportunity to get back into doing some coding and also helping out the community. So I've been focused quite a bit on making sure that our SDK works for app developers, making sure that app developers are communicating with our SDK developers to fix any problems that they have or fill any gaps that our current SDK has. So we talk about Ubuntu Touch as the human touch, but it is also the developer's touch. The big thing that makes Ubuntu different from other phone and tablet software is that it is Ubuntu underneath. It is the same platform as our desktop. It is the same platform as our server. All of the libraries and command line stuff is all there and available for you, just like it is on the desktop. From TVs all the way down to phones, it's all the same. So as a developer, you don't have to think, what version of Ubuntu do I want to target? What version of Canonical's software do I want to target? There's only one for you to care about, and it'll work on any of these devices that we support. Unity itself, while being the same, it changes depending on the form factor. So we've seen with Windows and Windows 8, they try and put the same interface, make it look the same, make it work the same on the desktop and on the tablet. And while people seem to like it on the tablets, it's not a very good desktop interface. And as you can see, if I go back, you can see that on all of our different form factors, it looks different. And it's tailored to work for that form factor and the specific input that you have for that form factor. But underneath, as far as the API is concerned, as far as the services are concerned that you will be interacting with as a developer, it's all the same across all of them. I'm going to go through a couple of the features real quick. The dash is where you get content in Ubuntu, whether it's your applications, your files, music, audio, that kind of thing. They're all provided by scopes in the dash, and each of our different form factors provides the dash in its own unique way. From a developer's perspective, if you're writing a scope though, it's the same API, it's the same code. All you have to do is give it the results, the image, and the name, and it'll show up correctly on the right device. The launcher is always on the left side, but it is not always the same. You'll see on the TV, for example, it focuses more on the scopes, the search providers. On the desktop, we've got the Ubuntu button on the top right corner, or top left corner, and on Touch, it's in the bottom left, where you can easily get it with your phone, or with your thumb. So again, same thing, slightly different configurations to make it work correctly for the same form factor. But when you're developing your app, you only have to provide it one desktop config file with the name of your app and your image and everything. The indicators, some of you, if you saw the phones or the tablets running at our booth today, you'll notice you can drag down and get the indicators from the top. And we also offer the exact same thing on the desktop and on the tablets. And again, it's the same interface. If you're writing an app and you want to have an indicator, you just write it one time and it'll work on both of them. We didn't implement them in the TV version that we worked on last year, but it will be coming soon once we port the TV to the new code base. And then the HUD, which was a new advancement that we made a couple of releases ago in the desktop, where we take all of your apps, huge nested menu structure, and we parse it and we make it searchable. So you don't need to know where in GIMP you need to go to find the blur filter. You just hit your Alt key, you type blur, and it'll come up with a list of suggestions from GIMP's menu that you can choose from. And again, we've implemented the same thing in the phone and in the tablet using the same interface. And we're actually extending that now going forward to where instead of just menu actions, you'll be able to inject like text fields or sliders, different actual controls into the HUD that you can use from your app. For our development environment that we released in January, we chose to use Qt and Qt Creator, and we provided a series of plugins to go with it to make it work better with Ubuntu Touch devices. If you can see the screenshot here, we provide a series of templates for you to choose from. There's the simple UI, the tabbed UI, which are QML-based, and JavaScript. You can get an HTML5 touch app where you don't have to write any QML code or C++ code. You can do it all in HTML and JavaScript and CSS if that's what you're familiar with. And then we've got the Unity scopes, which I talked about earlier, is how you get search content into Ubuntu. As a developer, you've got several choices of programming languages and toolkits that you can use if you want to target Ubuntu. Our recommended one is QML and JavaScript. If you're not familiar with QML, it's a declarative language where you really just say what you want and point it to other components and say, I want this to work together. And QML just kind of magically makes it work together. And where it doesn't provide the magic for you, you can use JavaScript to tie things together. A little bit later, I'm going to be showing an app that I wrote in about a day and a half to access the XDA forums using Ubuntu Touch. And it's written entirely in QML and JavaScript. But if structured markup and JavaScript's not your thing, if you like C++, you can do that too. And then you've got access to the entire Qt library that you can use. Or if you were doing HTML5 already, you can do that. Either local HTML5 apps or remote HTML5 apps. We've built an API into the browser where remote websites can hook into the Unity shell. John mentioned earlier that rd.io music streaming service added this. So if you go to their website in Ubuntu desktop right now, you'll actually get player controls in the sound indicator on your shell from their website. And you can do that. You can package native HTML5 apps that access the same thing. We support the Cordova API, which is what PhoneGap uses. So if you've written a PhoneGap app, you can easily port that to Ubuntu also. And of course, we make OpenGL available also. So if you've got a game or some 3D program that you're writing, you'll be able to access that context directly. The SDK itself is quick, easy, and powerful. I'll show you in a little bit how much of an app you can write in a very limited amount of time. I said I spent a day and a half on this, but it was really a day and a half of spare time on it because we had a couple of big announcements over the past couple of weeks that have taken up some of my time, so I haven't been able to spend much on it. But so it's quick, it's easy, it's powerful. We also have convergence built in. We want Ubuntu devices to go from phones to desktops. And we already have the shell working where it can go from phone to desktop. But we need to also make sure that our apps can go from phone to desktop. So one of the key concerns when we wrote the SDK was making that possible. So I'll show you some of the things that we provide in the SDK that allow you to do that. And then finally, we provide some really easy ways to visually customize your app and make it look professional and make it look like it fits in with the rest of Ubuntu without a lot of work on your side. So the first thing is the components themselves, which we provide. These are based on Qt Quick 2. We provide buttons, sliders, progress bars, all of the basic components that you would expect in a toolkit. And as you can see, they run perfectly fine on the desktop, just as they do on touch devices. And in fact, any application that you write for Ubuntu Touch using the SDK will run just as well on the desktop. It'll just come up in a window instead of going full screen. The design team introduced a concept called grid units, which are kind of a mix between physical size and pixel size. So it's never quite the same physically or pixel-wise, but it's always the right size. So you can say you want your button to be 10 grid units wide, and 10 grid units is the right size for a button on a phone, and it's the right size for a button on the desktop, and it's the right size for a button on the TV, even if it's going to be different sizes for each of them. So when you're writing your app, instead of measuring components in terms of pixels or in terms of inches or in terms of millimeters, you do it in terms of these grid units, and then it'll automatically adjust that depending on where your app is being run. So you can kind of see an example. These aren't exact numbers, these are just kind of thrown out there to show you how it would work. But the same grid unit size scales for different screen sizes and different screen resolutions. So this will let us use a high-density screen like the Mac Retina display and automatically scale components up to fill the extra space instead of having these tiny little buttons that you can't click. And then lastly, we provide something called conditional layouts. If anybody's done responsive layouts in CSS, you'll know basically how this works. But the premise is that you define your components and then you define a series of layouts for them and conditions for when those layouts should be applied. So you can say, if I have 50 grid units of width, then use this kind of squashed stacked layout. But if I have 100 grid units, then put them one on top of the other. If I've got more width than height, you can arrange it one way. If you have more height than width, you can arrange it another. You can show and hide them. You can nest them into other components if you need to. It's really very flexible about what you can put where and what conditions you can use. It doesn't even have to be strictly related to screen size. If you wanted to change your layout, if it's got a keyboard and monitor plugged into it, even if it's technically a tablet screen, you would be able to do that also. And then lastly, we provide theming support and 3 different themes that you can use by default. You've probably all seen the ambience theme. The Suru Dark theme is what we use for the drop-down indicators. And then more recently, we've added this gradient theme, which we're using for a lot of the core apps. And I also use the gradient theme in the app that I'm going to be showing you a little bit later to give an XDA feel to the application itself. And then if these three themes don't work for you, you can also provide your own. So if you're a company and you've got your own brand and you want all of your widgets to look a certain way, you can produce a theme that will do that for you. I wanted to go over a couple of the things that we offer for app developers. So if you're writing a free or open source app, you can use our Launchpad project hosting service for free. It gives you version control using Bazaar. It gives you bug tracker. It gives you mailing lists. You can define teams and give permissions to teams. And it's just a really great way to track a development project. And it's what we use internally in Canonical for tracking all of Ubuntu's development. So it's got a lot of work put into it. We know that it scales and meets a lot of needs. You can see we've got there are pictures of Launchpad and Bazaar, which is command line, but you can also get some GUI apps that'll show it to you in nice structured source trees. Is anybody familiar with Bazaar? Okay. How about Git? Yeah, that's more. Git, Bazaar is very similar to Git. So if you've mastered Git, then Bazaar would be no trouble for you. And Bazaar also integrates completely with Launchpad. So if you have a Launchpad project, we have a specific Bazaar URL prefix that you can use to branch code from that. If you can tag a bug in Bazaar using the Launchpad bug number, and when you push it to Launchpad, it'll update the status of the bug automatically for you. And as that code goes through the review process and lands in trunk, it'll keep your bug updated automatically. You don't have to keep going back and updating your bug tracker to make sure it's up to date. We also offer some online resources for information and for help. The two primary ones for app development are the Ubuntu Developer Portal and Ask Ubuntu. The Ubuntu Developer Portal is where we put all of our API documentation, all of our tutorials. We've generated a series of cookbooks for commonly asked questions and answers to them, how to do this or that. You can get the SDK from here. If you go to developer.ubuntu.com/get started, you'll have links for how to install the SDK. You'll have links for a QML tutorial and how to, lost my train of thought. Basically, it'll give you everything you need to do to get started writing your first app and getting it into Ubuntu. And then Ask Ubuntu is a Stack Exchange site where people can go to ask their questions and other people can go to answer them. And this has really grown to be an invaluable resource for Ubuntu as a project and for app development specifically. So if you have any questions at any time, you should go to askubuntu.com, see if somebody else has already asked it and answered it, and if not, ask it on there, and I'm sure you'll get an answer pretty quickly. And coming up soon, we've got some big changes to our packaging system. John mentioned earlier that we had some problems during our last showdown where our packaging infrastructure and our review process just could not scale to meet the demand. So as a result of that showdown and over the last year, we've been working on a new process, and that resulted in a new package format that will let us automate a lot of that and reduce the amount of overhead that goes into the review. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to get a new My Apps portal where that new, you can upload your new packages and they'll automatically go into this new queue with the very short review process. I've been told it takes about 5 minutes to review an app, so we shouldn't have the backlog that we had anymore. And then we also have these new click packages, which are very simplified versions of Debian packages. They install into the user's home directory, so you don't have to worry about installing them as root and the security problems with that. It'll also let us run lockdown system partitions so that apps can't go changing system config stuff. They can only access the user space. And that's built into Qt Creator also using our plugins. So you can just pull up the packaging tab on there, you give it some information about your app, and you hit create click package, and it automatically produces one for you. So it's a lot simpler from beginning to end than the old process that we had. So this is screenshots of the current My Apps portal. I don't know how different it's going to look, but as you can see, you can provide screenshots for your apps and icons for your apps. And that's what will show up in the Ubuntu dash when somebody goes and searches for it. You'll be able to have app previews so people can see screenshots and ratings just like you have in the Google Play Store. Only it's all going to be built into the Ubuntu dash. Speaking of that, so this is the App Store in Ubuntu. The same place you go to get your installed apps is where you go to get your not yet installed apps. You don't need to think about whether you have something or not before you decide where to go. So if you want a note-taking app, you can just go to your dash, start typing notes, and if it's installed, it'll show up in the installed section, and if there's any note-taking apps available to install, they'll be in the available to install section, and you just click on it there, and it'll download and install from there. And we'll also have suggestions on there. So if you write an app that becomes popular with a lot of people, then it'll start to show up as the default suggestions for new users. So that'll help get your app in front of other users also. And that was it for the overview. If anybody wants to take a break, after this I'm going to be going over the actual steps of creating an app. Are there any questions so far? No? Oh, got a couple.
During the break, is there anything that we should be downloading to make sure that we have downloaded by the time you're ready?
If you have Ubuntu already installed, you can download the Ubuntu SDK. You can also go to launchpad.net/xda-developers app and grab a branch of that, because that's what I'm going to be going through during the next segment.
Are you going to set up SDKs for other OSs?
Not right now, no. This is something that's come up a lot, and it's something we would like to do, but right now the focus is on finishing the SDK, and then we'll start thinking about porting it to other platforms.
Any platforms being front runners? Windows.
Yeah, Windows and Mac would be the front runners. Somebody has already ported it to a Mac unofficially, because it is just Qt Creator and Qt and some shell plugins. So there's really not a whole lot of work that goes into porting it. It's just that all of our SDK developers currently are backlogged with work to actually finish the SDK in time. Any other questions?
Is there a location to download the dev package directly? Because I run Ubuntu, so I just need our boss.
The dev package for the SDK? You can get it from the PPA. There's instructions if you go to the developer portal.
Okay.
The instructions have you installing a PPA.
Okay.
So you can just go there and grab the dev packages if you want to.
Thank you.
I'm just going to kind of go over the code itself instead of walking people through developing it, because I didn't see too many Ubuntu laptops out here today. But if you get this bizarre branch, all of my slides are labeled with the revision number, so you can go back and see the actual changes that went into it. But this will give an overview of how easy it is really to get an app up and running. So the first thing I did was I created a new project in Qt Creator. I picked a tab UI, and this is what I got right out of the box. A giant screen with a hello tab, and if you clicked on that, you would have a world tab also. So it's not much to look at, but it is fully functional without having to type a line of code yourself. But that's when the actual work had to get started. So I wanted to do an app that was relevant to this conference, and I noticed every time I went to the XDA forums, almost everybody's signature said, sent from xda-developers app on Android. So I thought, that seems pretty popular. Let's see how much work it would be to get a similar app going on Ubuntu Touch. So the first thing I had to do was find out exactly what API it used, and it turns out it uses a XML RPC plugin that produces kind of a lot of XML. If anybody's ever seen it, there's probably 4 or 5 times as much markup as there is actual content. But fortunately, QML makes processing XML really easy. So let's see if I can switch over to the actual code real quick. So I created a new forum list component that I could just drop into any app. And the main component of this is a list view and this XML list model here. And the XML list model makes it really easy to parse XML feeds from anywhere of just about any type. There are actual XML RPC plugins that could be used, but since I was trying to go with minimal dependencies and get this done fast, I just used the raw XML. So you can kind of see here, the list view itself just takes a model, and the model, you give it a query, you can give it a source directly if you want to. In this case, I actually had to send it some data in a post call, so I wasn't able to just give it a query. And then you've got this query field here, which is an XPath, and you can see kind of just how deeply nested I had to go to get any kind of data out of the response that it sends. But once you have that, you just give it the XPath. You can create these XML rules down here to pull individual fields out of it. And then once you have those in the model, what the list view is going to do is it's going to pass it on to what's called a delegate. And so up here I've got this, one of the standard Ubuntu components that we provide is the subtitled list item, which has big bold text for one line and then multiple lines of smaller text. So I had to pull out the model name and the model description that we defined those rules for down below, and just plug it into those fields, and that was it. And when you load up the app, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to initialize this list view, which is going to initialize its XML list model, which is going to automatically go out, make the call, get the data, pull it back in, and build everything back up. And so this is what's really nice about the declarative nature of QML is I don't have to tell it when to do things or what to do. All I have to do is connect the pieces together, and it already knows what it needs to do to get up and running. The only little bit of JavaScript that I really needed to do here was to tell it what to do when you click on the list item, because that it didn't know. So what I wanted to do is you'll see later what I do with that, but it changes. I've got up here, selected form as a property on the list view. And in QML, any property also has an onChanged event handler. So all I have to do when you click on it is set the new property. And then anywhere else in the code, I can set an event handler on that property and do something when that field is changed. So the next bit of thing I had to do, now that I had my form list model component, is I had to put it in the app itself. So what I got from the template the first time was this main view component, which is the top level for a QML application. And then I had a tabs component with a couple of tabs already. And then inside each tab, you start with a page. And then inside of this page, I actually created a page stack, which is kind of like another set of tabs without the tabs. So in the main forums tab, I'm going to have a stack of pages for the different levels of the forum. So you start out with a category, you go down to specific forums, and then topics in a forums, and then the actual thread. So my page stack is what lets me do that. So here inside of this top level page, all I have to do is just declare a forum list inside that scope, and it automatically gets added to it. All I have to do is give it the current forum number, which is the internal ID that the XDA forums use. And that was all that was needed to get it to connect to the forums, pull down the data, and build the actual list. And then I added this change handler, as I was saying before, so that when somebody clicks on an item, it will automatically call this callback, which is what I use to then move it on to the next nested level. So in revision 2, that's what I did. I added this forum list to my main tab and told it to start with forum number 0, which is the top level, and that got me all of the categories. So on the next one, now that I had the top level categories, I wanted to pull up the list of sub-forums of one of those categories. And fortunately, the interface for both of these levels is the same. So I could use another forum list, because I've written reusable code, and call it a different ID. And then when you click on the category, it will set the forum ID for this other one, which will then trigger it to go out, make another API call to the forums, pull the data back, and build this new list. And you can also see I've got a back button in my toolbar now, which is provided automatically by the page stack component. So as soon as you go from one page to another in a page stack, you automatically get this back button to take you back up the stack. So I didn't have to do anything. If I wanted to add more toolbar items on there, I could add buttons or text fields or any other components in there. But I didn't have to, it happened automatically. So then I wanted to make it look a little bit better. And we had this nice gradient theme which lets you set the actual color values that you want to use. So I went to the XDA website and pulled up some graphics and grabbed some colors out of them. It's probably not official, but it looks pretty close. And all I had to do was add 3 lines of code to the main view. I had to tell it what the header color should be, what the footer color should be, and what the middle color should be, and it automatically builds the gradient for you. So the next thing to do was to get the list of topics out of a forum. And this is where I had to call a different part of the API. So I couldn't reuse the forum list that I had created before. I had to make a new topic list that called a different API and got a different set of data back. But it was essentially the same thing. Set up the XPath query, filter out all the extra XML from the data you actually want, and set up XML roles to pick out individual fields from it. And I was able to build a real simple list of topics, but it's not really informative. You kind of want to know some more about a topic before you drill into it. So I wanted to show the number of replies there were and the author of the topic. But the standard list item delegate that I used wouldn't let you do all that. So I had to create a custom component in order to do it. Switch back around again. So here's my topic list, and I created this new topic list item where you can give it, in addition to the text, the number of replies, the author, whether it's got new messages in there or not, which you can't use right now because I haven't implemented logging in yet. And then in this, we have what was basically a copy and paste of the standard list item component from the Ubuntu SDK, except for that I added a couple of extra components. I added an Ubuntu shape, which was going to have a yellowish-orange background to contain the number, and the labels themselves to use the standard label and the subtext label. And then up here at the top, I created the properties that I was going to use to set those. And because I was essentially just going to be passing the values on from this new main component to its child components, I just set property aliases, which do exactly that for you, and let QML handle the rest. So instead of passing around the number of replies using JavaScript, I've got a label down here called counter, and all I had to do was say that the replies property is an alias of the counter's text property. So you say, these are the number of replies on the item, and it automatically forwards that value down to the right child component for you. And so with that in place, I was able to get that working. So you can see now we've got a nice reply count next to each message, and you've got the thread author down below. And so then the only thing that was left was to actually pull up the list of messages that are inside the post. And again, I wanted to use a custom component for this to make it look like an actual message thread and to pull avatars from the XDA forms, which a lot of you don't have. I don't know why. It would look a lot better if you all had an avatar on there. But so it was the same process again. You can pull that up. So again, same basic process. I started out with the same base component that's used for all list items. This time, I put the whole thing inside a giant white Ubuntu shape. If you're wondering, the Ubuntu shape is just this kind of rounded rectangle that you see everywhere. It's got a specific number for the curves, and it just kind of makes everything look the same. So if you wanted to do the same kind of look in your app, this is what you would use. And then for the avatar here, I didn't have to do anything to load images or anything off the internet. All I had to do was create a QML image object, which has a source property, and I just aliased that to the avatar property of the main item. And that was all I had to do. Once you set the source on an image, QML handles the process of going out and getting it for you and loading it up. And so that was all I needed to build a message box on there, which you can see there. So that was 7 revisions. I went from creating a new project to having the ability to browse all of the XDA forms using nothing but QML and just a little bit of JavaScript. So with that in mind, we kicked off a new app developer contest this week, specifically around the new Ubuntu SDK and writing Ubuntu SDK apps. It's going to run until September 15th, so you have 6 weeks this time instead of just 4. And the winners will get a Nexus 4 running Ubuntu Touch with the winning apps already installed on it. And more importantly, if you're a winning app, you will have the opportunity to get into the base install for Ubuntu Touch. So if it's an app that makes sense to have, if it's something that a lot of people will like, it works well, it fits in with Ubuntu well, you can get that in the default install of Ubuntu that's going to go out to potentially millions of consumers in a year's time. So that's a really big opportunity also, probably bigger than just having another Nexus 4, especially for people around here who have no shortage of phones I've seen. So if you're interested in doing that, like I said, it started earlier this week. You can go to developer.ubuntu.com/showdown to find more information about it. And well, that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Yes, you have to have a demo of the finalized.
Oh, yeah, do actually. I'll run it right here. See if my Wi-Fi is holding up. It is a little bit slow connecting to the API. There we go. So you can go here and browse it. One thing that we provide is you'll notice that when you start to scroll, the header goes away automatically. And no matter how far you scroll down, as soon as you scroll up a little bit, it comes right back. So it automatically gets out of your way when you don't need it, gives you the entire phone screen for your content, but then is available again when you want it. So you can see here I still got the tabs up there. I haven't added any other tabs. If anybody wants to work on this, it's GPL3 licensed. It's on Launchpad. Go to launchpad.net/xda-developers app and get a copy of the code. There's a team set up for it. Right now I'm the only one on the team, and I would really like to change that. So here's your chance to create a really rocking XDA forums app for Ubuntu Touch. Yes?
I noticed that this seems to be very XML-centric. I was wondering what's the role in JSON? Could certain of these things which data fed be fed with JSON data?
Yes, there's a, like we had the XML list model, there's a JSON list model that does pretty much exactly the same thing. You give it, again, a structured path of where in the JSON object your data actually is, and it works very much the same way. I had another app that I wrote to browse Reddit, and I was using Reddit's JSON API. So it's almost identical to what you just saw with XML. Yes?
I just finished up downloading the SDK from the internet.
Okay.
But I don't have like an app. What do you use for your IDE there?
It's QCreator. If you're on Ubuntu, and you just open up the dash and search for Ubuntu SDK. So QCreator's got this really nice plugin architecture, very similar to Eclipse, and you can actually have the plugins separately. So when you install the Ubuntu SDK, you'll have the vanilla QCreator, but then you'll also have an Ubuntu SDK launcher that will launch QCreator with all of these extra plugins on it. Yes?
Are you going to have templates for the different environments? Like I noticed you have like a grouping tab kind of a thing, and you have different component, layouts. But for each of the models, you're going to have like a template to get started with in the development kit.
Each of which models?
Well, like one for the TV and one for the laptop, one for the phone.
No, because
Those are components, right? Well, those are like layouts, individual.
what we want to do now that we have the conditional layouts that I covered earlier, we want to provide a set of pre-made ones. So you can say, if you have an app that's got a list and then content for something in the list, like an email client or a lot of others that use the same thing.
Same master detail. Right?
Yeah, just to provide the same set of layouts, conditional layout definitions around that. But it's not going to be specific to a form factor. So what we don't want people to do is think, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make a phone app. We want them to think, I'm going to make an Ubuntu app, that because it's going to run on the phone and desktop and TV. So don't limit yourself to just one form factor when you start to write an app. Think about all of them and how your app would be able to change its layout or its look the way we did with Unity to work on those different form factors without having to have separate code bases for all of them. We have simple templates right now. We've got the tab one, and then we've got one that just has a page stack. We would love to see more templates coming in that provide different default component structures, but they're not going to be specific for a given form factor. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Let's go to synchronization work in the Qt Creator. I've never used Qt Creator before. I stick to
mean by code synchronization?
We'll say I want to load up a repository and authorize from the key creator so that way when I make a change.
Oh, so backed by like Git or Bazaar or something?
Right.
It does have that built in, so when you go to start a new project, pick your template, and then, so it'll ask you here what to use for version control. And it's got Git and Bazaar and Mercurial. You can use whichever one of those you want. And it'll init your local repository for you before it sets up all the files and everything. I haven't done too much otherwise. I mean, I've been using Bazaar so long that I just do it all on the terminal, so I don't know how Qt Creator provides you the ability to commit or view your source history or anything like that. I would imagine it's very similar to Eclipse, though. If anyone's come by the booth, they've probably seen it. So I've got it on.
I mean, in Qt Create to like show like how you actually run an application on the device.
Oh, let's see. Yeah, I've got it down here. It might just be easier to show in the menus. So if you have a device connected to Qt Creator, we've got this devices tab here where it'll detect your device. I've got the device, I just need to grab my cable out. If everyone wants to see, I'll do that. So if you have an Ubuntu device attached, you can just tell it to detect the device, give it a minute. It's going to check and see if you've got developer mode enabled, which will give you an SSH server and some different dev tools on the phone itself. That takes a few minutes to install. Luckily, I already have that. So all I have to do is run application on device. And if anybody's watching, it should come up here in just a minute, if you can see it. And what that's doing is it's copying all the files over onto the device and executing it. So there you go, it's running on there. It's really that simple for any of these apps. Here, well, I've got this open, show the packaging tab. So this is all of the information you need to create a click package right here. And it will precede it based on a little bit of the project information that you had, a little bit of your local setup, like it already knows my email address, so it puts that in there already. And this is all that you need to create a click package, and you just click create click package, and there it is. And then you would take that to developer.ubuntu.com, and you would upload it, and you would give it screenshots and descriptions and whatever meta information you want to give it. And then for the users, when they go to their apps lens and they search for something that matches either your app's name or one of its keywords or its description, then it'll show up right here on the apps lens, even if they don't have it installed yet. And then it's just one click away for them to install it. Anything else? Anybody? Everybody itching to get to the cocktail party tonight? All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll turn it over. Oh, we have one more going to stop us from getting drinks.
Sorry. No, I was actually wondering, seeing as this also runs on phones, what kind of system do you have in place for very hefty applications running on an old phone? I mean, in a couple of stuff. You know, you've got your current hardware, your new device.
You mean when today's hardware is a couple of years old?
Yeah.
We've been pretty good on the desktop side of things, supporting older hardware going forward. I expect we'll have the same kind of focus as we go forward with the mobile stuff.
All right, any other questions? All right, well,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.